Dear learners, welcome to video lecture series 7 for BA first semester Political Science in the paper of Introduction to the Political Theory. I am Dr. Deepak Kumar Kashyap, Assistant Professor at Pandit Sundarlal Sarma Open University. Today, we will discuss one of the most fundamental concepts in political theory, that is legitimacy. Whenever we talk about government, authority, democracy, or political stability, the idea of legitimacy becomes extremely important. In simple terms, legitimacy refers to the belief that a political authority has the rightful and justified power to rule. A central question in political science is, why do people obey the state? Do citizens follow laws simply because they fear punishment or because they are used to obeying authority? In this question, is obedience based on legal obligation or on a deeper belief that the government has the right to govern? Political thinkers have offered different explanations. For example, the sociologist Max Weber argued that people obey authority when they consider it legitimate, and he identified different forms of legitimacy, such as traditional, charismatic, and legal rational authority. Similarly, philosophers like John Locke emphasized that legitimate government must be based on the consent of the governed. Understanding legitimacy is important because it explains how political systems maintain stability and gain public support. When citizens believe that a government is legitimate, they are more likely to follow laws, voluntary, and support political institutions. In today's lecture, we will explore the meaning of legitimacy, the major theoretical explanations of legitimacy, and why legitimacy is essential for the functioning of modern political system.
Slide, we talk about to introduction the concept of legitimacy. Basically, legitimacy explains the critical difference between mere power and rightful authority. A ruler may seize control through military force, but the raw power alone does not make governance legitimate. Legitimacy is fundamentally about acceptance. When citizens believe that a government has the right to rule, public authority becomes stable and durable. Decisions are followed not out of fear but out of shared sense that the system is just. Without this belief, political system must rely solely on coercion, a strategy that history shows cannot sustain long-term stability. If we talk about the meaning of authority, legitimacy, the word legitimacy derives from the Latin term legitimus, which meaning lawful or according to law. In political science, however, legitimacy extended far beyond legal compliance. It refers to the moral and legal justification of public authority. That sense, the ruler have a genuine right to govern. If we talk about its dimension, there have three dimensions of legitimacy. First is the legal dimension, second is the psychological dimension, and third is institutional dimension. In legal dimension, the authority established through recognized law and constitutional framework. In second, the psychological dimension, it believes the public beliefs and the trust that the governing system is rightful and just. And third, the institutional dimension. In this dimension, structure and processes that reinforce the perceived validity of authority. If we talk about the three major concepts, power, authority, and legitimacy, they cannot be separated without without collective. They cannot give a complete meaning. So, power, authority, and legitimacy that are interlinked to each other. If we talk about if we understanding the concept of legitimacy, that requires distinguish it from two related but distinct concepts, that is power and authority. They together form a hierarchy from raw influence to morally grounded governance. If we sort, we know the concept of power. The power, it is the ability to influence or compel others' behavior regardless of consent. In authority, in simple terms, it the power that is recognized as a rightful and accepted by those subject to it. And third is the legitimacy. It is the moral foundation that grant authority its binding force and public trust. If we talk about the characteristics of legitimacy, legitimacy basically have several characteristics which can it defines. The first characteristic is it believes belief based. It is rooted in public perception and collective trust, not merely religious status. Second is the moral justification. It provides ethical grounding for the exercise of public authority. The third characteristic is reduces coercion because it minimizes the need for force by fostering voluntary compliance. And last one is the fluid over time. It can grow or erode depending on government performance and public trust. If we talk about the sources of legitimacy, the legitimacy we can first question is arise that where does the legitimacy come from? So across different society and historical period, the political authority has drawn its justification from a range of sources. The dominant source often reflect a society stage of development, culture, and institutional maturity. The first source of legitimacy is tradition and customs. In tradition and custom, it is a long-standing practice and hereditary succession that command habitual obedience. The second is religion. The religion basically defined a divine sanction or religious doctrine that legitimizes ruler as chosen by a higher power. The third is constitutional law. Constitutional law basically a formal legal framework that defines the scope and limits of governmental authority. The fourth is democratic elections. Popular participation and consent expressed through free and fair voting. The fifth is ideology. Ideology is basically a shared belief system like nationalism, socialism, liberalism. They justify the political order. And the last sources, that is the performance and welfare. It the result like economic growth, security, and public service that aren't touched. If we talk about where the concept of legitimacy first type originate, so it is basically in relation to the social contract theory, which is given by the Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If we talk about the social contract tradition, they argue that the legitimacy originated from the concept of governed. The three foundational thinkers shaped this tradition, each with a distinct emphasis on why people agree to form a political community. If we talk about the Thomas Hobbes concept of legitimacy, he said that the people create the state to escape the chaos of the state of nature, where legitimacy arises from the need for security and order. If we talk about the John Locke explains government exists to protect natural rights like life, liberty, and property. If it fails, the proper may rightfully withdraw consent. And third, Rousseau. Rousseau defines legitimacy flows from the general will, where the collective interest of the community as whole, not the desire of the ruler. The common thread if a citizen fails to protect the rights and welfare of the citizens, it loses its legitimacy and may justly be challenged. If we talk about the theories of legitimacy, the first theory is the democratic theory. In democratic system, the legitimacy arises from the popular sovereignty, the principle that ultimate political authority resides with the people. This is not a one-time grant of consent, but a continuously renewed relationship between citizenship and their government. If we saw the characteristic of democratic theory of legitimacy, first is free and fair elections, where regular elections give citizens voice and renew the mandate to govern. The second is political participation, where citizens engage through debate, assembly, and civic institutions. The third is rule of law, means no one include ruler is above the law. And fourth, that is accountability. The transparency and check on power sustain the public trust. If we talk about the second theory of legitimacy, that is the Marxist theory. In this theory, Karl Marx offered a fundamentally different perspective on legitimacy. According to him, the state is not a neutral arbiter, it is an instrument of the ruling class and designing to protect elite economic interest. Where legitimacy in this framework it is maintained through ideology. The dominant class controls key institutions like education, media, religion to shape public consciousness, where citizens are made to believe that the existing system is natural and just, even when it systematically serves the interest of a privileged few. It marks called the false consciousness, the acceptance of an unjust order as legitimate because people have been socialized to see no alternative. If we talk about the the different types of legitimacy, the next theory is performance legitimacy. In this performance legitimacy is a pragmatic form of political acceptance where citizens support a government primarily because it delivers tangible results. When people see economic growth, rising living standard, security and public service, they grant the system credibility regardless of its ideological or democratic foundations. If we see the characteristic, first is the economic growth, second is the public safety, and third is the welfare services. And these are the characteristic of performance legitimacy. If you talk about the important concept, that is the given by the Jugan Habermas, that is the crisis of legitimacy. That very country where many countries we can say that there have the crisis of legitimacy, where uh, a crisis where occurs when political institutions systematically fail to meet the expectation placed upon them and fracturing the bond of trust between state and society. If we saw that in any country they have the political stability, instability, they have the legitimacy crisis where the corruptions happen, economic downturns, institutional failure, and social insecurity in present in that country, where the crisis of legitimacy can be seen in that countries. If we talk about the importance of legitimacy, the first importance of political legitimacy is the political stability. The legitimacy is the cornerstone of the political stability. When citizens perceive their government as rightful and they obey voluntarily, not because they are compelled, but because they believe compliance serve to the common good, where In political stability, there have a voluntary compliance where citizens follows laws and regulation willingly, reducing enforcement cost. Second, reduced coercion. In legitimacy, governments with the high legitimacy requires minimal police or military force to maintain order. And third is the sustained stability, where the social order endures even during periods of economic hardship or political transition. In second importance is it legitimacy is it strengthening the democracy. In democracy cannot survive on institutional design alone. It requires citizens who believe in the fairness and justice of the system, where legitimacy built with the essential trust between people and their political institution. When legitimacy is high, citizens are more likely to participate in election and civic organization. Second, accept electoral outcomes, even favorable ones. Third, hold leaders accountable through democratic channels. And fourth, resist authoritarian appeals and populist demagoguery. Without legitimacy, even the most well-designed democratic constitution become hollow framework, vulnerable to the erosion from within. The third importance is it helps to governance and development. Effective governance and sustainable development that depends on a foundation of political legitimacy. When citizens trust their government, they cooperate, paying tax and following regulations and supporting public initiative in welfare schemes, infrastructure projects, and public health programs succeed at a far higher rate when the population trusts the institutions and delivering them. Thus, legitimacy creates a virtuous cycle of trust, cooperation, and progress. If we talk about the conclusion of legitimacy, its theories and its importance, legitimacy is the foundation of political authority and it transforms raw power into rightful rule and it enabling government to govern with the consent and trust of their citizens rather through their coercive alone. To conclude, legitimacy is the foundation of political authority. It transforms power into rightful rule. Various theories like social contract, democratic, Marxists offer different explanations. Without legitimacy, government face instability and crisis. Therefore, legitimacy remains essential for political order, democracy, and development. Thank you. Thank you so much.